All right, Anthony, it's so great to have you on our podcast. This is honestly like a real treat. I remember talking to you a couple of years ago. It feels
Hmm.
like forever ago, especially in this pandemic. So welcome to our
Thank you very
podcast.
much.
Thank you for
Appreciate
being
it.
here.
My
So
pleasure.
we'll get right into it. Given the pandemic, university football, RSEC football, it's been canceled, which is I think a real bummer for a lot of people. How have these cancellations kind of impacted your life, especially as a member of the coaching staff? Can you work in any capacity, either virtually with your players, or has it really halted your ability to coach as well?
Well, I think like everybody else, we had to adjust. When everything happened there in March and we got into confinement, we had to go online. So we had to secure all our meetings to make sure that one, we were still doing stuff to help the players out, but not just football wise, but we were more concerned about mentally, because we knew this was going to be very difficult, going from, be able to have interactions with one another to now being at home and then that's it, doing your studies from there, which nobody was used to. And then two, trying to keep them busy. Cause like, as you know, as we're home, we look forward to something else, like just not just sitting in front of a computer and doing meetings. We wanted to do something different. So that was the main reasons why we started doing our meetings with the guys at night, not only for football, but we also had Zoom meetings for workouts as well with the guys, again, just to make sure that they were in shape as much as possible. But I think the biggest thing was we still had a chance to play football because U Sports had canceled. Three of the four conferences canceled football completely, but
Right.
The RCQ decided to wait and see if we could have a season. So
Mm-hmm.
there was still, some hope that we might have a chance to play, especially there early during COVID-19.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I mean, and like as athletes and student athletes, like sport is kind of your escape. So suddenly not having that, I bet it was very difficult for your students and your athletes. I mean, this kind of is a good segue into my next question. Like before U Sports, you were coaching at a professional level. How different is it coaching professional athletes and then going to U Sports where, they're not just athletes, they're student athletes as well. And the pressures are a little bit different on both ends. Like how is that transition and did you enjoy it?
I've definitely have enjoyed it. The one thing I learned right away, no matter if it was professionally or at the college level, guys want to compete. They want to win. So that hunger was exciting to see. The big difference at the professional level, of course, like this is what we do for a living, in terms of this is how we get paid. So, we're able to really demand certain things from the players. And if they weren't following up, whether it was on the field or off the field, we could address it. And of course, if there's things that they weren't doing, that of course we're able to release them. While at the university level, that's not the case. When you bring somebody into your university, you got to mold them and make them, come and get used to what the environment that you have at the university. But I think the biggest thing was just the amount of games. Like in the CFL, you could play up to 23 games. Where here at the CIS level, of course, you're playing somewhere about 11, 12 if you go all the way to the Vanier Cup. So I learned right away that as an offensive coordinator, I didn't have to bring a lot of the same multiple plays that we had in the CFL because we have so many games. You have to show them so many different things. Where here at the CIS, it's less games. So you don't need all these concepts. Like, we're okay with these concepts. So that took a little bit of an adjustment for me. But in terms of once the season started, I mean, the hours are the hours. The hours are long. The only difference that was a challenge for me was in the CFL, as coaches, you're probably in the office around, 5 o'clock, 5:30, and then you're home around 6 or 6:30. Here at the CIS, it's kind of, I was in the office by 8, but we didn't have the players until 4:30, and then we didn't get off the field to 10. So it took some time for me to adjust because I came home, I was tired, but I was also hungry as well. So that was the only difference, was just like adjusting my time frame with everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that because I bet that was a big transition. And one of the questions that I was wondering is that, your players, I think a lot of them looked up to you when you were playing with the Alouettes and whatnot. And I'm guessing for some of these guys, maybe they don't show it, but it must have been a little nerve-wracking to have Anthony Calvillo come in and be part of the coaching staff when you joined the coaching staff. So, how did you ensure that they were comfortable, maybe knowing that maybe at the back of your mind, you're like, okay, I think some of these guys might be a little nervous because of who you are?
Well, I think it was two things. One was what you just explained of who I was and what I did on the football field, because they didn't know me. All they saw was this person on TV. Now I was going to get a chance to spend a lot more time with them. And I think that's what happens when you spend more time with people. You get to know them, you get to understand them more. And through time, that we were able to break that barrier. But the other thing was the language barrier, right? We're at a French university. And so most of the kids know English, but I learned right away that some guys are very uncomfortable speaking English, even though they know it. Like for myself, I'm practicing a lot of French. I could read a lot of French. I could understand it, but speaking it, I'm still very hesitant. Even at home, I'm at home trying to practice with my family, and they're always saying, what did you say? And it just gets me so fired up. I'm like, listen, I'm trying to learn this thing, and you guys are not understanding. But that's more on me than anything else. But the main thing was I wasn't sure if it was a language barrier or was it just them being a little bit intimidated by me. But I think over time, I got to know the players. They got to know me. And then it was just a smooth transition from there. So, for the most part, they knew right away that I'm just another human being just like them. And they got to know my personality as the season went along.
I hadn't even considered the language barrier, to be honest. But I feel like coaching at a collegiate level, I've my only experience is as a player, but you build such a different relationship because you have, that full 4 years, 5 years in U Sport, and you kind of grow up, your athletes grow up a lot during that time. So you get this close bond. For yourself, you're the offensive coordinator and the QB coach. And, I'm very new to football. How often do coaches share kind of many hats? Is that something specific to the Carabin, or is a lot of coaches kind of wear 2 hats on a single team?
It depends on how large your coaching staff is. So at the CFL level, you pretty much have a coach for each position. And then sometimes the head coach might have 2 different hats. They might be the head coach and the offensive coordinator, or head coach and the defensive coordinator. So it all depends on that particular team. So all I know is the more hats you have, the better you are as a coach. It definitely helps. But, we're very blessed here at the University of Montreal to have 8 full-time coaches on staff, and that's not normal at the CIS level. So we're able to have one coach pretty much for each position, and that's an advantage because each team or each position gets a chance to hear specifically from a coach that knows the position and that can coach the position. So, that's usually how it works, but it all depends on the particular team.
So that's a lot of coaching staff. How do you guys maintain communication, and does that mean you guys just have a lot of meetings personally as a coaching staff? Because I'm used to hockey. It's I'm mostly got 3.
Yeah, there is the most important thing is all the coaches, we got to be speaking the same language. So we have a playbook, we review the playbook, and then we go through each concept and play. To make sure that when we're coaching this, that we're all saying the same thing, because we'll come together as an offense. So the entire offense will be together, but then we'll break up. So the offensive line coach will go into his room with the offensive lineman, and he's coaching them specifically. Same thing for the running backs and receivers. So the message that happens during our staff meeting is very, very important, because then the coaches are going to take it into their own personal meetings, give the players the explanation, and then we got to go on the field. And then once we go on the field, we have to, again, make sure that we're all teaching the exact same thing. So there's a lot of time and effort that's made to make sure that that we show the players that, 1, we know what we're doing, and 2, that they could trust us. And there are some mistakes here and there that come up, and it goes back to communication. But for the most part, it's so important that we do that.
Has that been tougher now with COVID? I mean, do you need to have as many meetings in general, given that, right now there's no games?
So that's been our challenge. So going into this season with the hope of having a season, we had new ideas that we wanted to try this year, some adjustments from last year's offense that we had. So during the summer, we were able to train with the players on the field, not in the team atmosphere, but in terms of the quarterbacks will be together. We'll have some receivers, and then we'll start working on particular routes that we're going to try that year or for this upcoming year. So we had those meetings because we wanted to, make sure that our players were ready if we had the football season. So whether it was in person at the Sepsum or online, like everybody's doing now, we were always meeting.
Okay. I'm curious to know, your experience as a quarterback on the very strong CFL offense, especially with the Alouettes in the early 2000s up until, 2009, 2010, of course, when you won those championships, also back in 2002. How does that experience translate into your work as an offensive coordinator at the U Sports level? I mean, are there any strategies that you've seen at the CFL level that you've implemented at this level? I know you mentioned earlier about the concepts. You don't need to bring in so many new concepts given the different realities, but I'm just curious to know if you can build on that a bit.
So when I retired and got into coaching at the CFL level, I really had to make an adjustment because, I had played for so many years and I just understood the game. And when the coach told me, okay, this is how you're going to read a play, this is how it's designed, I studied it and I went out there and performed it. But that was me after 20-something years of playing. I didn't do that in my first few years. I didn't put in that extra time and effort. So I had to make sure, and I learned this from Jacques Chantelain, who was our head coach in Montreal, my last year there. But he said, you gotta be able to see the game through your players' eyes. So I had to be able to see the game through the quarterback's eyes. So if it was a young quarterback, I had to put myself in this situation. What is he able to learn? He's not able to learn and understand the stuff that I learned in year 20. So I have to be a little bit more patient and maybe not ask him to do so much. And then once you spend time with them, then you get a better understanding. Okay, I could push them and ask a bit more of them. But that's part of being a coach, is understanding your players and see how you could push them. So when I came to the CIS level, I already had the mentality. Okay, I know what I asked of these professional quarterbacks. Now I know I can't ask this of these young men, but there's a certain level where I'm going to push them because I think they have a little bit more. So that was part of the biggest thing I had to learn when I went from playing to coaching. And again, I don't care how long you played for, 5 years, 20 years, nothing prepares you to go on to coaching because there's so many other details that are involved in every single play. Like for me as a quarterback, when I played, I didn't know the full protection, but I knew if I was protected, if they told me, okay, on this look, you're going to be hot, which means there's an extra guy coming, you have to get rid of the ball. I knew that. It was just locked into my head. So I got to just make sure that I'm able to relay that same message to the young guys, but not asking too much where they're thinking and not playing. And that's the balance that every coach has.
This plays super well into my next question because football, when I look at it, it's a very strategic game. It's a few sports where there's a stoppage and then everyone sets up a certain way and then the play starts. But it's also very reactive in the sense that you probably have, 10 seconds to do something. Maybe that's too long, especially as a quarterback. So how do you kind of coach that? And can you coach that? Or is it something that just innately comes through repetition? Hockey, we say hockey IQ. I'm sure football, some people might see the game better than others, but how do you coach that? How do you coach them to be reactive? The look might not be there every time, so here are your second options. Is this something you coach or you just practice?
Well, we do both, right? So basically, you put the play on paper, you show the guys, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. Then we go on the field and we walk through it, explain to them what we're trying to accomplish. But like you said, once you get on the field, you might have the play drawn up on a piece of paper and you might have the defense lined up in a certain way. But when you get on that field, guys are moving around, you got noise, and what you expect to see, the defense is doing something different. So, we try to get our players prepared week in and week out by trying to study the opponent. And I think that was the challenge here at this level is, the young men are in school. all day, and then they come to us right from class, and then we are busy the entire time. So they don't have a whole lot of chance to watch a lot of film on the opponent. So we try to watch it together to explain to them, okay, guys, this is the defense that we're facing. These are the adjustments that we have to make, and we have to be ready for all this stuff. But like you said, you get on that field, sometimes stuff happens and you got to react. So what we try to do is, especially at the quarterback position, I'll go through, like last year, I went through the entire season and looked at the mistakes that the quarterback made, whether it was mentally or physically, and then I try to come up with drills to help them with that. And I think that's what coaches try to do. Okay, this is what happened. How can I help this young individual to improve on that? So that's where I get most of my drills from, is from what happened during the game, and then try to do that in the off season, because you have a lot more time in the off season to work on all this stuff. But this game is happening so fast, and you have to adjust.
That's really interesting.
Because like most sports, like you said, you don't want to think. Anytime as an athlete, if you're thinking, like, you're not playing the game. Like, So, and I mean, film is so important in football. I mean, most sports now, like data is so important. In U Sports, do you guys have access to a lot of film, like opponents' film? Is something like, do you send someone to go video their games, or teams are willing to share videos?
No, it's pretty much the rules. So once you play a game, then it's kind of put on a main server, or another school will ask for the game. So we have access to all the games that our opponents play, because that's what we watch to prepare to see what they're doing. I'm assuming it's a rule. I'm assuming it's a rule because it happens in the CFL and it happens up here. And then from there, and that's the thing, because what happens is, once, let's say we're playing Concordia, let's say Concordia played McGill, so we would ask for that game. And then for us at an offense, we're going to break down their defense. So we're putting all this data in for each play. Okay, here's the defensive front. Here are the linebackers. Here's the DBs. These are the coverages. So, and that takes some time, because you got to look at it, take your time. Okay, this is the coverage. And then once you do that, then you break down another game. So you have like 3 games of Concordia's last opponent that they played. And then that's where you get your data. That's where you get your information. Okay, on 1st and 10, based on the data that we inputted, it's telling us, okay, this is what they do on 1st and 10. Oh, this is what they do on 2nd and medium. And then we create our game plan based off of that information. So it's definitely a process.
So much work.
Oh, no, it's like I said, like as a player, it was great, because I would, let's say you played on a Saturday, and then you had like 2 days off, and then you come in on Tuesday, and then the coaches have the game plan ready.
Yeah, you got the Spark Notes version as a player. You're like, perfect.
But as a coach, you gotta get that ready for them. So the coaches don't have any days off. Like we are busy all the time. The only the day off, the 24 hours that we have, is basically the day before the game, because usually we're done at, we see the guys for maybe 45 minutes, and then we got to show up for the next game. So you mentioned game day. Yeah, that's our time off, those 24 hours right there.
Well, you talk about how like that was a big transition from being a player and then going to becoming a coach and seeing how much work goes on. And that's where we kind of want to go right now in this conversation. I want to bring it back to when you retired in 2013, and then you came back to the Montreal Alouettes in 2015, 2 years later, but this time part of the coaching staff. So first off, did you always want to be a coach? Did you take those 2 years off to kind of see what your options were? Can you take us back to that time and what that was like, and why you ended up coming back to the Owls, but just in a different capacity?
No, it's a great question, because I always said I was never going to coach, and the reason being because of the hours and the commitment that's involved with it. I just said, why am I ever going to do something like that? So, but as I got closer to the end of my career, I was like, okay, I got to figure out what I want to do after football. And I started thinking, what's my passion? What do I enjoy? And of course, it was still sports. It was still football, but it was the X and O side of it. So it wasn't the business side of it. It wasn't going into the front office and putting on the suits and doing that. No, I wanted to be around the guys. So it was really my last couple of years of playing where my mindset started to switch. Like, okay, this is what I think I want to do in the future. So when I retired, I really took the year 2014 off, just because I haven't had a year off, in the last 20 years, and I wanted to enjoy a summer because the football season always occurs during the summer. So we traveled. I actually went back to school because I never graduated from university.
Okay.
So when I inquired about my credits back at Utah State where I went, they're like, listen, your credits are still good. All you need is 20 credits to graduate with a general studies bachelor's degree. And I'm like, sold. So I took like 8 classes online.
Good for you.
Yeah, congrats.
No, it was awesome. I actually, when I graduated, I actually even took my family back to Utah State and went on stage, and I wanted them to see me graduate, and I wanted them to see where I went to university. So at that time, my girls, they must have been, I don't know, they're 15 and 13 now, so they must have been somewhere like 10 and 8. But that, we had a great time that year. And then I wanted to stay in the city. To me, it was important for me to stay in the city. And I had this great relationship with the Alouettes. So to me, it was a smooth transition to get back into the coaching staff there.
So when you went back, did you still have teammates of yours on that 2015 team at that point? Or
oh yeah, there were still a few, without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay, so was that weird? Like, you were their teammate and now you're their coach. Was that like an odd transition, or was it actually pretty seamless?
Well, I think when I was still playing, I think people treated me like a coach. And again, I played up until I was 40, and I was playing with guys that were 22, 23, 24, and half the time those young guys, whenever I would come into the locker room or come into the area, it went from them talking, and then all of a sudden they're quiet because I came by. And yeah, exactly. And then, but the biggest thing is when I did become a coach, I didn't spend much time in the locker room anymore, because the locker room is where the players are at, and we did mingle in there sometimes, but most of the time was spent in the office. So it wasn't a huge weird transition, because you see a lot of ex-players that go from playing to coaching on the same team and then coaching the same guys they play with. So it wasn't a huge big deal.
Well, that's good at least.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just you sat at the front of the bus now instead of at the back on road trips.
You got that right. I always had my same seat when I played. It was the same seat no matter what. But as you know, as a coach, you're in the front.
You're the front. You can't have fun in the back.
No, it's all over.
So during your 2 years with the Alouettes, you kind of changed roles a lot. Was that a welcome change? Is it something you liked, or would you have rather stuck with one? I mean, I know earlier you said it, the more positions you have, the better it is because you get to see kind of everything. Did you like that change? Was it good for just your learning since you were new, or would you have kind of liked to focus on one coaching position?
Well, I think as a young coach, I knew the quarterback position. So for me, that was going to be the natural position to go in. But when I started, the only position that was available was a receiver coach. Yeah. And I was a bit nervous about that. But I had Andre Bolduc, who was also on the staff, helping me out, who was also an ex-receiver and an ex-teammate of mine. So that really helped my transition. And it got me to kind of understand and learn a new perspective of just trying to coach receivers. And then that particular year, which was crazy because I went from receiver coach to quarterback coach to co-offensive coordinator all in 1 year, just because of decisions that were being made. So there's a lot of information that was kind of thrown not only on my plate, but the other coaches' plate. And it was hard. Like I said, even though I played for 20 years, being put into that situation, there's a lot of stuff that I just did not know. When I look back at it now. So it was a big transition. And then of course the following year, I hired a couple of guys because now I was the official offensive coordinator, but I felt that I needed some like a veteran coach that knew how to be an offensive coordinator. And we convinced Jacques Champlain to come and join us. And I mentioned him earlier, and he was a big part of my growth and development of just trying to understand all the small details that's necessary to have a complete offense.
Yeah, those were a couple of tumultuous years. I remember just being on the other side of like reading the stories coming out. I was like, okay, there seems to be a lot going on with the Alouettes at that time. How has your experience as a CFL quarterback, as a leader, informed your style of coaching over the years?
Well, that's just it, right? So, for me, I've been, like I mentioned, quarterback coach, receiver coach, offensive
Mm-hmm.
coordinator. And the one thing I learned is, I'm trying to be myself. Even though I learned from great coaches like Don Matthews, Mark Trestman, just to name a few, and they all had their own little way of kind of commanding the room. But
Mm-hmm.
they were head coaches. When you're a head coach, you set the tone for the entire organization. And I have not gotten to that point yet where I'm like, okay, I'm the head coach. This is how I want things to be,
Mm-hmm.
how I want things run. But that hasn't been the case right now. So for me, what I've learned is try to be as honest as you can with the players. I mean, when you BS them, they're gonna know, and they're gonna lose your respect. So
Right.
you got to be upfront with them, and sometimes you got to tell them, okay, this is what we're expecting you to do. You're not doing it, and if you continue not to do it, then we're gonna have to give somebody else another chance. And I think that's the hard part when it comes to people that you played with, because
Mm-hmm.
you got to tell these guys, okay, yeah, we're friends and we're teammates, but you're not meeting the standard that we think that you should be. So either you got to do better, or we got to help you get better, or we're going to have to give somebody another chance.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, is try to be as honest as possible. But at the same time, you got to be consistent as a coach. That's the one thing I've learned is if you have a message and you want a certain thing to happen, you got to be consistent with that. Because if you're not, it's not going to just happen overnight.
Yeah, and I think any human just appreciates transparency. And
Mm-hmm.
especially athletes, like we all want to succeed and become better. So if you're just
Mm-hmm.
upfront with what needs to be improved, we could swallow it, be upset for like a day, and then the next practice, move on.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's it.
after your stint with the Alouettes, you moved to the Toronto Argonauts, and you got to rejoin with your former coach, Matt Tristman, and
Yeah.
general manager Jim Pop. So how is it rejoining with them, but under different circumstances? Now you guys are kind of working as a team on the same side of the coaching staff. How was that?
Yeah, so that whole transition, like after my time with the Alouettes, like I was mentally exhausted. Like when you mentioned, you guys saw it from one side. Well, being in it was exhausting mentally, and for me, it affected my soul. It affected who I was, and I didn't like how that made me feel. So I was really not going to coach that year in 2018. I said no.
Oh,
I don't like where this is going right now. I'm just going to take a break. So that was my plan. And then all of a sudden I get a call from Mark Trestman informing me that they have an opening on their staff. Would I consider it? And I had to think about it for a while because our family, we like to travel a lot. So we had this beautiful European trip set up for that particular summer, because like I knew that I was going to take the year off. I knew I was going to have the summer off. And then I was like, man, if I take this job, I'm like, Mark, I just spent all this money on this trip with my family. And
Yeah.
are you going to let me leave during the bye week? And anyways, there was a lot of things that were going on. But at the end of the day, I decided to go and learn from a mentor, because that's who Mark was. Like a lot of the stuff that I do now in terms of the playbook that I use, my mannerisms as a coach, I picked up from him. And I felt, okay, well, he coached me as a player, but what is it to be in those rooms when we're preparing for the next opponent? And that's what I wanted to see. So to me, it was an opportunity that I just could not afford to miss. And, it was the first time that I actually had to, leave my family, because we didn't move there. I mean, I rented an apartment there, but the family was still here. Summer was great because they came up, but
mm-hmm.
it was the first time that I was away from my family. And in the CFL, 75% of the players and coaches have to deal with that, where
Mm-hmm.
they come into the city and they play, but their families are somewhere else. So I remember the players and coaches talking about that, but now I was experiencing that for the first time. But I love the experience of going to learn from not only Mark Trestman, but from Jim Pop as well. They're in a new organization.
Yeah, it must have been a nice reunion, but definitely tough to be far from your family for the first time. Right. So before we conclude this interview, I wanted to ask you a question about the CFL. Because as we know, because of the pandemic, a lot of sports leagues all around the world have been affected by this. But the CFL, of course, wasn't able to have a season, didn't even go for the bubble, I think for financial reasons likely. And now a lot of people are wondering, what's going to happen to the league, especially since they weren't able to have the season, therefore they didn't generate any revenue and whatnot. So I'm curious to get what your thoughts are as a former player, as a former coach in the CFL. How do you view this situation? Are you in touch with anyone still at that level?
Well, I still got friends that not really play anymore, but more who are either coaching or in a general manager role. So, but for the most part, like, to be honest with you, when I'm coaching here, like, I'm so focused here. Like, when I come home, I try to spend time with my family and my girls. So I don't watch a whole lot of sports. But the fact that we didn't play this year, oh my goodness, I watch so much NFL right now and college football. It's been insane. But it was
game later today.
I know. We'll check that out later on as well. But but it's just like you feel for everybody. From the fans to the sponsorship to the coaches, the players, and and it's the finances, right? So, I mean, we all want to make a living for our families and put food on the table and roof over our head, and it's a challenge. So I definitely feel for every single person out there that's dealing with this. Specifically right now, we're talking about the people in the CFL.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm also curious to get your opinion. I mean, there seems to also be a strained relationship, I think, between the players and the ownership. From what I gathered, because like Mel, I mean, I don't really watch that much CFL football, more NFL in the last couple of years, but it seems that there's a discord because I believe that there was supposed to be a bubble, and they were negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement, and then I believe the owners kind of took a snap decision to just cancel the season altogether. So, when you were a player, did you feel that there was this disconnect between the players, because I know that there are PAs, player representatives, who regularly communicate with the owners and whatnot. But, is this something that's just new and kind of, more for this situation given how complicated it is with the pandemic, or has there always been kind of this?
Well, I definitely think this situation is definitely unique. But during my 20 years of playing in the Canadian Football League, I've seen the CFLPA grow with a great relationship with the league and the owners. It always gets a little tense when the collective bargaining agreement comes up,
of course,
every so often, because everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie and trying to get the best deal for themselves. So I think over the years things have been great, but in this particular year, again, with me being away and only reading and seeing articles of what's going on, I'm sure it was very challenging. The fact that they had to try to renegotiate some type of collective bargaining agreement to go into this bubble that they were trying to put together and trying to come up with a salary for the 6 games that they were going to have. So I'm sure it was a very stressful time for all those involved. But, at the end of the day, it's, the owners and general managers are going to make the best decisions that's best for the entire league. And seeing this big picture and sometimes as a fan looking from the outside in, maybe we don't have all that information, and we try to make opinions based on what we know and don't know. But that's sports. That's how it is. But for me, I'm just hoping that they do come back next year. I know I read some articles today about some coaches, general managers want to know the plan for 2021. Like, are we having this season? Like, this is the start. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I know it's challenging because we're still in the heart of this pandemic with no vaccine yet as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you have like a lot of these moral challenges too. I mean, hopefully they are getting maybe something in the works. I feel like everything was such short notice. Like, it just came and hit us like a wave. We didn't know what to expect. So I'm pretty sure the league was on a time crunch and the players were on a time crunch to make a call, and they just made a call. So hopefully now, as we're kind of riding this out, they just have more time to maybe prepare something that would be functional, but while maintaining safety and pleasing both sides. We'll see what happens. But
all we can do is wait and see what happens with that.
I know,
like I said,
there's so much uncertainty in life, and I feel for you and your athletes too. school must be terrible online, to be honest, and then not having sport as an outlet. But I guess ending on some pleasant notes, since the start of your coaching career, like what do you enjoy most about it? Obviously it's different than a player, but what do you really like about it?
Really trying to pass down the knowledge that I acquired over the years, and not getting too frustrated when they don't understand it. It's really allowed me to take a step back and really think about, really what comes out of my mouth, right? And making sure that they understand it correctly. And it's no different with here at my girls at home. I got two girls, 15 and 13, and sometimes I know, right? And sometimes they're kind of like, Daddy, what'd you say? What do you mean? And I got to be a little patient. I'm like, well, in my head, it's very clear what I said, but to them, it's not. So that's part of that process of just being a good communicator. And at the end of the day, trying to not only be a good coach, but be a good mentor and giving people advice, not just in football, but in life in general. I mean, I had great coaches that helped me from high school to my university. Even when I was a professional athlete, I still reach out to certain coaches who I feel are my mentors. And I'm hoping I could build a relationship with players like that, where they could come back and be like, you know what, you helped me make this decision based on the input that you gave me. So it's about just, giving them input and trying to make them better people in society. I know it's a corny answer, but that's the honest truth.
I mean, I feel that I still talk to my college coaches, and some of my fondest memories are not my time on the ice. I mean, I have some great memories, but like small conversations that feel really impacted who I've become as a woman. And like,
that's right.
Some of, I don't know, just like the things I'm passionate about that's not just sports related. And so, I mean, I'm really glad that you see that, because you do play a really important role in these gentlemen's lives.
For sure.
Well, Mel, I mean, it's funny because you talk about your memories as a player, and that's what I wanted to ask you, Anthony. I mean, after all this time, looking back at your playing career, there's, you've broken records, you won championships, but, what are some of the memories that you cherish the most?
Well, I think it goes back to, some of the championships that we won, especially the first one. I always talk to the guys about the parade that the city had for us in 2002, just going down St. Catherine Street. I mean, it was a blast, and then followed up in 2009, 2010. So those really stand out just because, even though the players, the Alouettes won it, but the city won it. So now when I walk around the city, people ask me they really ask not only about sports, about my health, my wife's health, how we're doing. And then they talk about the great memories that we shared together. And that's what's awesome. And my girls were young when I played. So this past year, the CFL, they were rebroadcasting certain games, and we sat down and watched them. And I'm like, yeah, the Daddy was actually an athlete back in the day. So I can't move around a lot right now, but look what Daddy was able to do. So
check out this bomb I'm about to toss.
That's right. So from that aspect, it's great, to share some of those memories with my girls. But the biggest thing is just walking around the city and hearing people talk about the impact the Alouettes had on them, and the memories we all shared together.
That's awesome. I mean, that was going to be my next question. What was your favorite championship? But now we know.
First one, always the first one.
Always the first one. I guess moving on, what's your ultimate goal? Do you have aspirations to continue to coach in Canada? Any dreams of going to the NFL, or do you want to continue in collegiate sports?
My main objective is to stay in the city. My girls already said if I get a job somewhere else, they're not leaving. They're going to stay here.
They made it clear.
So that's already established. So, and I love Montreal. I mean, this is home. I've actually lived here longer in Montreal than any other place, and I grew up in California. So this is it. My goal is to be here and coaching here in the city.
Well, Anthony, we want you to stay in Montreal. Everyone loves you here. I mean, I have memories. And again, I wasn't really that into the CFL or football when I was younger, more so now than I was younger. But my fondest memories, if any, were of you, of Ben Cahoon, of that edition of the Alouettes, and just the vibe that the city had when the team was in the playoffs, winning those championships. So, we are just very grateful that you played for the Alouettes for so long, that you're still here, that, the city is going to continue to embrace you. So thank you so much for doing this. We really
no problem. Thanks for that feedback too. I appreciate it.